Harm reduction really emerged from a grassroots political organizing, and it's much more complex than just the goals of preventing disease transmission. It can be traced back to the 60s, grassroots oppositions to the legal suppression of illicit drugs. Hubs of harm reduction in its early phases were in Western Europe and in New York City in the early 70s and 80s. And there's really a lot of imperatives, public health, ethical, and human rights imperatives to involving people who use drugs in harm reduction initiatives. And the idea is that the voices of people who use drugs really must be at the forefront of any harm reduction movement in order to combat the stigma and the misconception that people who use drugs are incapable of their own self-determination. So community, peer, and grassroots and activist groups are really interested in a political analysis of harm reduction that takes into account social, economic, racial, political inequality, moral contexts. And the leadership of people who use drugs on these accounts is pivotal to the sustainment of the movement, really, and the rights of people who use drugs.
You know, as a rule, if you're not trying to get clean or nothing, they close the doors to them. These places that they're opening for the low income and stuff, they're supposed to be there to help people. Well, if you smoke, you don't let it. If you use drugs, they don't let you. If you curse, you get kicked out. Excuse me, these people, you know, I'm an exception. I don't know why, but I've chosen to go. I like life too, and I had to check out what you guys were doing too. You know, they said a little change of pace once in a while, but you know, like, I went in there and I said what I do, and I just wanted to break out. It's making me feel mad. I just wanted to change of pace, right? So I went in there and just checked things out. And the stories I would hear, like, the lies they would have to tell these people just to get in. And I thought, they're not going to get no help because it starts with a lie. You know, oh, I want to get clean. Why they want to get clean? They're like me. They want to. They enjoy being lied, and that's just part of them. They're never going to get straight. But they need a home so bad, this is what they've had to do.
So it's really important to note cautions around the sort of mainstreaming of harm reduction and the institutionalization of harm reduction, which prefers to express opposition to the social marginalization of drug users in terms of medical outcomes. And it's really reluctant to engage in a political criticism. For example, there's a BC Ministry of Health publication just from a couple years ago that states, quote, legalization is not part of harm reduction. And that's really problematic. Obviously, they're coming from a medical perspective, but that really limits what harm reduction is all about, especially when we consider that there's evidence from all over the world to support that drug prohibition and the criminalization of people who use drugs are really a very primary source of harms related to illicit drug use. So harm reduction in that sense is really in line with social justice. It rejects the whole neoliberal notion that drug use is solely about the responsibility of the individual, and that whole thing really fails to link the behavioral risks to the larger social structures. And harm reduction recognizes the systemic oppression, the production of systemic oppression through economic, social, political, and cultural institutions. And it works with individuals and groups who experience ongoing oppression in a way that's really attuned to sound ethics and the idea that everyone has moral worth.
I worked with an organization in Toronto called the Safer Crack Use Coalition, and I was shocked by the level of knowledge that the people involved in the Safer Crack Use Coalition had, and by the sheer pull that coalition had too. Like, they single-handedly developed and began delivering mass safer crack use supplies from everything that we are not doing here still, like the pipes, everything, the mouthpieces, the screens, and widespread education all over the entire city, because it was so necessary. And it was amazing. And then So much so that the City of Toronto took it on and took it over and started delivering those same services for free.
I'm here largely as a representative of Harm Reduction Victoria, which is a collective that came together in 2008 here in Victoria after the closure of our only fixed site needle exchange. And so we were, as a group, outraged with that and wanted to come together to organize around opposing that decision and ensuring that that people who use drugs in this town are treated with respect and that they have access to the supports and services that they need.
You know, there's no public washrooms for people to use, you know, there's nowhere to sit down and enjoy yourself. Like, you know, it's like, it's starting to remind me of, like, and the police, it's like the Gestapo, you know what I mean? They've got these places for the homeless now. I stayed at one for 2 months. Thank God I am who I am. I went in there and said, hey, it's me. I'm not coming here to get clean because that's not my problem. My problem is getting society to deal with us. You know, we're not the problem. They're the problem. They're ignorance because sure, some of us are the problem, but just like some of you are a problem. Some of you guys are out there littering. I personally think alcohol is worse than any illegal drug possible. I've seen so much damage from that, it kills me, you know. Why do you think half the girls and guys are out there? Because drunks get drunk and do things they shouldn't do.
For those of you who maybe are not from Victoria or don't really know the story much about the needle exchange that closed in 2008, just sort of some local context around that. The program had been run by AIDS Vancouver Island. It was incredibly underfunded when you looked at the number of people that were accessing that service and the number of the amount of dollars they were getting to run that service. There was no increase in funding in over 10 years, and there was a huge increase in the number of people that were using the service. So it was really underfunded. Obviously, you know, we're not in great shape in this province or in this country for around homelessness and supporting people who are not adequately housed. So, you know, we've got that going on. We've also got significant drug use, illicit drug use in Victoria when you look at our population. And so there was a whole media frenzy that started happening around what people were seeing from the outside looking into the needle exchange. And what people were seeing was folks literally sort of spilling out onto the streets from the needle exchange. And that made sense because it was a small space. There was lots of people needing that service, lots of people on the streets, and not enough places to offer them housing and support and services and a place to come out of the rain. And so folks in the neighborhood were not happy with that situation, as were many of us. But some folks chose to address that situation by launching a lawsuit against the province, AIDS Vancouver Island, and a number of other parties because they were unhappy with the so-called public disorder that they saw in the neighborhood. And the needle exchange really became a scapegoat for much larger societal issues. Unfortunately, that lawsuit put enough pressure on the landlord from whom AVI was renting the space to run the needle exchange, and that space was closed in May 2008.
Harm reduction certainly has changed my life as well. As I know Jill said that, and I was really thinking, it's changed my life too, because, you know, I'd say most people in this room are probably drug users of some sort. You know, however, for many of us, it's not really an issue because, yeah, we do it behind closed doors, we have homes, this or that, right? However, sometimes, you know, certainly has been times in my life where, you know, especially when I was younger, where I was drinking an awful lot and doing an awful lot of unsafe things. And I had like it was still one of those things where it was like, you just don't talk about it.
So we have an incredible amount of knowledge in Victoria about harm reduction and about the benefits that it offers to not only people who use drugs, but the entire community. We have stacks and stacks and stacks of research, really high quality research. Lots of folks in this city know what's going on and know that those services are important. But we really still are very much in a crisis situation where we don't have the services to match the needs of the folks that are using those services. So we have mobile needle exchange. We have outreach teams that go out on foot in the city, more than one organization offering those services, but what we don't have is a dedicated fixed site needle exchange service, and that's a really, really important part of how we offer healthcare for people who use drugs. Mainly because it provides a space, a sense of community, a place to connect with referral services, to see the street nurse, to just have somebody who will listen to you with an open mind, with non-judgment, with an open heart, to come in out of the cold, to have a warm beverage, to get some clean, warm clothing when you've been out in the rain all night. It's a really important place for a very marginalized group of folks. And obviously drug use happens across the spectrum of society, and there's lots of people who use illicit drugs who have homes and they don't have any need to go to a needle exchange. But there are a significant number of people who do need those services very much. And so what Harm Reduction Victoria has been focused on for the most part is trying to make sure that those services are available to folks.
Harm reduction, as we've heard here time and time again, has really came from the grassroots, and it really came from people, by and for people who use drugs, because it was necessary and it was needed, and those roots are so being lost now, and it's being taken over in that sense by the medicalization of it and the professionalization of it. And while I feel that it is good in some ways that it is mainstream, because then the stigma disappears, it also loses that, it loses that, as Heather was saying, that sort of that personal connection, and that rooted in the grassroots and the need for people connecting with people around these issues, and also the fact that looking internal to yourself and seeing how harm reduction can apply to your own life, and even if it doesn't apply right now, how can it and how could it, and that we are all probably in need of a little harm reduction sometimes.
So we've always sort of come at things from a revised 4 pillars approach. So some of you may have heard about the 4 pillars approach to drug use in Vancouver. Their pillars are prevention, enforcement, harm reduction, and treatment. Our 4 pillars are housing, healthcare, income, and supports. We don't have enforcement in there. We come at this from a human rights and a health perspective. Yeah, our 4 pillars are housing, healthcare, income, and supports.
Is that the city of Victoria?
That's what Harm Reduction Victoria sort of came up with. Oh. We sort of looked at the 4 pillars approach in Vancouver, and we thought this doesn't actually work for us. We don't think that this works for people who use drugs. We don't think it works for the community. And so what we've sort of based our organizing around is our own 4 pillars that we sort of try and point out.
And now it's your turn to express your opinion on nowpolin.ca. You can add your own priorities as to what the pillars to manage the pernicious and inevitable use of recreational drugs should be. If you go to nowpolin.ca and then choose provincial polls, click on provincial polls, and then look for health service. If you click on health services, then you will look at almost at the bottom of the list here, drug addiction management. There you have a list of choices. If you don't see the initiative that you would like, it's not there because you have not put it there yet. Nowpolin.ca is a practical tool to express your initiative. Remember, letting your opinion to be counted is the essence of direct democracy.